Hello and welcome to the video. Today we have another narrated short story titled The Journey of Confession. I hope you enjoy. The fire crackled and spat as Taryn basted the rabbits with a mixture of fat and herbs. "Shouldn't be long now," he said, sitting back down. He was glad to see that the group had started to get used to sitting by the fire and talking once the daylight abated. "Here, get some of this into you," Balanos said, as he passed around a large flagon of wine. Taryn drank deeply, as did Artair. Then Thalia took a small sip and passed it to Nessa, who smelt it, shrugged and took a pull. "Awful stuff," Nessa said, as she got up to go and find her customary dinner of scavenged vegetables. "I still think a stew would have been better," Balanos said, as he merrily sipped away at his own flask, not waiting for his turn with the flagon. "Sure, it would go further, but we're only a day's journey from Marlburg Castle. I think we'll survive. Plus, roasting the meat like this just tastes better," Taryn said, nudging Thalia with a smile. "Well, when you're on campaign, you've got to savour every morsel," Balanos mumbled. "Were you in the army for a long time, Balanos?" Thalia asked quietly. "Only all my life, missy. It was a good life, great comrades and all, you know. But we were always surrounded by death." The old archer leaned back against the tree he was sitting under before continuing. "It's a sad day when you realise that the deaths of your friends don't bother you anymore." He looked down, crestfallen. Taryn understood the feeling well. He himself remembered a time when the deaths of the men under his command would paralyse him with sorrow. It still deeply saddened him, of course, but one day something just clicked, and instead of pain, he'd felt a sudden numbness. "My mentor told me that snap in your mind is when one becomes a true soldier. You finally act the way a soldier is supposed to," he said, looking into the fire. "That sounds awful," Thalia said, putting her hand on Taryn's shoulder. "Well, everything changed for me when I met Ira," Balanos said. "Who's Ira?" Nessa asked, walking over with a basket of mushrooms and assorted legumes. She's my wife, though I don't think I can still call her that. She left me a few weeks before the benefactor nabbed me." The old man's eyes began to grow wet, and he wiped his face roughly with his sleeve before taking another swig from his flask. Taryn broke the silence. "The company I worked for, the Forgotten Sons, they basically trained me since I was a boy. I don't think I ever got the chance to know anyone long enough to get married." Nessa sat down solemnly and stared into her basket of food for a moment, as if dreaming of somewhere far away from their roadside camp. "I did. When I was very young, our leaders saved a boy who had gotten lost in our forest. They weren't sure what to do with him, because usually the forest would have claimed an innocent child." The druidess began to prepare her meal as she spoke. "So, the elders put him with the rest of us children until they finally decided to leave him at the edge of the forest a few weeks later. Ever since then, I had a special bond with Drustin. Of course, we could never be together. Outsiders were strictly prohibited from our realm, but I often thought of what could have been," Nessa said. She hadn't looked up once while telling her story, Taryn had noticed. "Well, maybe it still could be, if there were an alliance between Arundel and Foil Forest," Thalia said, smiling optimistically. "No, it can't," Nessa replied, jabbing a stick sharply into the fire. "He was killed while defending me from an assassin." Taryn sucked in air between his clenched teeth, and the others looked equally horrified. "An assassin, sent by the king." Artair watched as the group ate their meal in silence. Thalia looked so uncomfortable she might cry. Balanos was drawing from his flask so heavily that Artair thought it would surely run out this night. He looked over at Taryn, who returned an awkward glance. "Well, from what I've heard, It's actually the High Channeler behind most of the assassinations and such, Taryn said sheepishly. He certainly likes to take care of things personally. I can vouch for that, Artez said, his palms starting to sweat. Every time he thought about the High Channeler, he grew cold and his heart tried to beat through his chest. Did he hurt you too? Thalia said, not looking up from her lap. More than anyone could. I've been around death, sure. The streets of Arun High are littered with the dead, he said flatly. I didn't see many dead while I stayed there, Taryn said curiously. Depends on where you're looking. Starved children, people succumb to illness, victims of violent crime, you name it. The city guard always cleans up the streets before sunrise, of course. Gotta present a false sense of prosperity in Arun High, Artez said, his eyes staring off into the woods beyond the fire. I just accepted it. My brother, on the other hand, he was always trying to be the good guy. He joined the city watch to try and make a change. Thinking about his brother, he started to laugh quietly. A lot of good it did him. The High Channeler killed him right in front of my eyes. Again the wine went round. Thalia couldn't bear to look Nessa in the eyes. She could sense her sorrow. Stop it, Nessa shouted. I can feel you in my head, princess. Thalia hadn't realized that what she was doing could be felt by the other person. She was at a loss for words. Yeah, what did you do to us back in that town? Taryn said, looking her in the eyes. I was almost afraid to ask. Thalia looked into the flames. I don't know. I've always been good at reading people and telling if they were lying. I guess my channeling has something to do with it, she said. It's called mind compelling, Nessa grumbled, still not looking at anyone. That's what we call it anyway. By the sounds of it, it's the same thing that Balanos experienced in his time loop, only that was much more powerful. It's the ability to read minds and to push your own thoughts into others' heads. The druidess pinned Thalia with her stare. We had a few people in the forest that could do it. It made it easier to keep people away when those who came close told tales of monsters and wickedly evil druids. Thalia looked down at her hands as if they would tell her more about this power she possessed. But channelers, and some normal people who are smart enough, can feel when you're doing it to them, so don't, Nessa snapped, before looking back into the fire. Sorry, I still don't really know about any of my powers, Thalia said softly. Yeah, well, you should probably learn. As we just found out, rogue channelers are quite the threat, haha, Taryn said with a laugh and a jovial wave of his hand. At the lack of response to his attempt at lightening the mood, Taryn sighed. I've actually seen the High Channeler in action. I don't know how we'll be able to stop him when the time comes, he said, growing more serious. He took out 25 guys without batting an eye. Who knows what he did to our leader, Tharma? Now he was a tough clam. I bet he gave the High Channeler some trouble. In the end, Taryn chuckled mirthlessly. Thalia had heard that alcohol made people chatty, then sad. This was the first time she'd seen it in practice, however, and it seemed to be true. Any time she'd been around her father's court, or at a gala or ball, people had always been on their best behaviour, so she had never had the chance to see the way drink could bring out a person's innermost thoughts. Well, at least we have good food and good wine tonight, Balanos said, leaning forward into the firelight. As he did so, he rubbed the back of his neck. Taryn furrowed his brow. Why do you always rub the back of your neck like that? He asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Balanos took another swig of wine. Well, some 10 years ago or so, we were completely out of food during this siege. We'd eaten the horses first, then dogs, then rats. He trailed off for a moment. But we could see the enemy's storehouse just on the other side of our walls. So me and two mates said, Why don't we go for a quick raid through the Sallyport? In and out, 20 minutes, right? But our commander said no. So we did it anyway. Got enough food to feed 12 men for 3 or 4 nights, we did. But the commander wasn't having none of it. And because we'd opened the Sally Gate without permission, it was counted as treason. My 2 mates were hung first. With this, he rubbed the back of his neck again before continuing. So, it was my turn, and the noose was over my head. Then the horns called out. Our reinforcements had arrived and broken the siege. I was spared, but only because everyone was too happy to care about our little trespass. So now, every time I think myself lucky, I can feel the rope burn on the back of my neck. The group all looked to one another as the old archer chuckled and took another pull from his flask. The lulling conversation came sooner than Nessa expected, but she was glad for the excuse to take her leave. She wasn't sure if it was the wine or the effect of spending so much time with these people, but she found herself opening up more than she was used to. I think that is enough sharing for one night. We should all get some sleep. We have to be in the presence of the benefactor tomorrow, and I want everyone to be on their guard, Nessa said, getting to her feet. Like I said, I had him checked out by some of the best. What he has told us, at least, was all truth, Artair said, also standing. I still don't buy it, Nessa replied curtly, and with that, the group slowly made their way back to their various tents for the evening. The next morning, Nessa woke first. She pulled the vines that had been covering her living tent's entrance back into the earth. Nessa was walking around the side of the wagon, looking for the water barrel, when she froze. Just behind the wagon near the road was a blue corpse. The body's lifeblood had soaked into the dirt, turning it almost black. Hey, you'd all better come and look at this, she shouted. As she heard the rustling of people in their tents, she bent down to search the dead man's pockets. His skin was cold, which explained his complexion. He must have been dead for a while. She noticed a note nailed into the man's chest on the inside of his vest. It simply read, "On behalf of the benefactor." Unpinning the note, she rose and handed it to Taryn, who jogged over. Balanos strode over and looked over Taryn's shoulder. That's certainly an odd thing to wake up to, Balanos said, a grim smile on his face. How did we not hear this in the night? Or more worryingly, why didn't your bloody pooch, Thalia? Nessa asked, turning to look at the princess, who rubbed her eyes as she walked toward them. The large dog bounded along next to her, then put its nose in the air as it scented the stiff. I guess the benefactor is following us more closely than we thought, Artair said, looking down at the body. The wagon pulled into Marlburg Castle later that afternoon, and Balanos was ready to fall asleep on one of the fancy duck-down mattresses the benefactor had installed in their chambers. Once everyone had refreshed themselves, they congregated in the main dining hall. Reynold was standing by the giant fireplace, looking into the flames in contemplation. My spies tell of your success. The town of Westmount is liberated? He asked, looking at the approaching group. The misfits of Arundel did their part, for better or worse, Balanos said cheerily, as he and Thalia sat down in the 2 plush armchairs by the fire. They tell me you took quite the beating, Reynold said. Taryn leaned on the back of Thalia's chair. Not sure if you would call it a beating, but we did need to lick our wounds for a minute afterwards. Why are you following us? Nessa snapped, clearly not in the mood for pleasantries. Balanos had almost gotten accustomed to Nessa's calm side, and seeing her burst back into her old self was quite the shock. I'm not following you per se, but I am certainly keeping close tabs on you and your progress. I've invested far too much time and money into the lot of you for me not to, Reynold replied, seemingly unfazed by Nessa's sharpness. I don't hear any gratitude in your tone, Nessa. A small thank you would go a long way, you know. What do we have to be thankful to you for? Nessa said, rounding the armchair to stand in front of the benefactor. Well, for one thing, You weren't killed by that assassin who found your camp early this morning. One of my agents had been following him for quite some time. This particular assassin had been on your trail for a month or two before my man caught up with him," Reynolds said in a tired tone as he looked down into Nessa's face. His stoicism contrasted against her aggression. "The time and money I have spent on keeping you all from harm is astounding. You think the king and the High Channeler would let a roving band of miscreants unsettle the common people without retribution? If you want to know what you can thank me for, how about saving you all from your fates and setting you on a righteous path?" He turned his back on Nessa. Balanos thought they had been through this argument one too many times to warrant having it again. "I have no interest in repeating myself. Either you trust me and my methods, or you don't. If you don't, the door is over there. I am sick of defending myself to you people." Balanos put his hand on Nessa's arm, and she turned to face him. "Come on, plant lady, he's right. We've been over this 100 times. Let's hear what the next job is, and then we can go have some grub." Nessa gave him a blank stare. "Fine, it's not like I have much of a choice anyway." The old, robed man narrowed his blue and yellow eyes at Nessa as he turned toward the dining table, which was currently covered with parchments and different types of maps. With a wave of the benefactor's hand and a whoosh, the table cleared itself. "That's convenient," Balanos said as he sat down. "Does everything in this castle run off channeling?" Artair asked, running his hand across the table's surface, then under it surreptitiously. "Mostly yes, but some things, like the cooking, I do myself," Reynolds said, seating himself at the head of the table. "You do all the cooking?" Thalia piped up. "That's right. I thoroughly enjoy it. My wife taught me how. She said I needed to learn in case something ever happened to her." Thalia looked down as she sat. "I'm sorry, Renald. I didn't mean to pry." "It's okay, Thalia. Unlike some people, you weren't really prying." He paused, looking at the others as they took their seats. "All right, everyone listen. Your next task is going to be more dangerous than anything you have faced yet." Again he paused as he laced his fingers together in front of him. "On the newly established northern border of Arundel is a town called Morrow Marsh. I've heard of Moorsend Marsh, but not this Morrow Marsh," Balanos interjected. "You are correct," Reynold replied. "It used to be called Moorsend Marsh when it resided within the kingdom of Moorsend. Since the border war, the king has changed its name. Regardless, it's a boggy quagmire, and the only real export the land had, until recently, was peat. But with the advent of war, the entire area has turned into one big, muddy grave." Reynold paused, taking in a deep breath. "That sounds disgusting," Thalia said, looking a little queasy. "Entire battalions of troops on both sides have entered the bog, never to return. The countless bodies of the troops, local townsfolk and livestock have drawn the attention of a rat king." Balanos turned to look at Taran with concern, who in turn shared a knowing look with Nessa. "What is a rat king?" Artair asked, looking around the table with alarm. "I've never heard of them before." "Yeah, how bad can a big rat be?" Thalia said, adding her confusion to the mix. "To those of you who don't know, a rat king is no ordinary barn rat, but one that has been changed by channeling. Infused with dark magic, these beasts are drawn to death," Reynold said, and the two youngest of the group leaned in as they listened. "They are said to walk on their hind legs and command armies of giant rats with the use of their twisted channeling," Balanos added, having heard of these abominations from a friend in the army who would love to gossip about unnatural things. "I thought they were just stories," he said. "I'm afraid not," Reynolds said gravely. "They can wield enormous power, even more than most humans, and the giant rats that Balanos mentioned are the size of a large dog, with a crazed rat's ferocity and mob mentality. Believe me when I say this creature is not to be underestimated." The table grew silent for a time before Reynolds spoke again. "The witches, this Rat King, they are something far more troubling than simply dangerous beings. They are monsters, a plague that Arundel hasn't seen in generations. I still have no idea why or how they have come back to the land. I cannot stress this enough. These are dangerous times ahead." "Wonderful. Now that our confidences have been boosted, how do we kill this monster?" Arter asked. Everyone looked at the benefactor. I have no idea." The end. That was The Journey of Confession. It is the 7th part of the season, so if you have missed any of the others, consider going back and getting up to date. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment any feedback you have, and consider subscribing as there will be more content to come. This was a Tello Tale. Thanks for watching.